Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. We continue our look at the proclamation of an emergency which the government of the day claims is needed to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. But the immense powers invested in the executive branch will now be insulated from any checks and balances, a role that the Constitution entrusts to the legislative branch of government. Now, how dangerous is this road that we're on? Over the next half an hour, we're going to be speaking to lawmakers and politicians for their perspectives. Joining us first, we have Dr. Kelvin Yee. He's the MP of Bandar Kuching and chairperson of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, Science and Innovation. Good evening, Dr. Kelvin. Now, earlier today, opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim called on all lawmakers to appeal to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong to revoke the state of emergency and convene parliament immediately. Dr. Kelvin, are you going to be writing to the Agong?
Yes, I have actually wrote in already, and my party is fully supportive of such move.
Do you expect MPs, most MPs will heed this call by Anwar Ibrahim?
I believe that most, if not all, the opposition MPs will heed the call. I hope that MPs in the government bench will also see the importance of the legislature during this pandemic and also heed the call.
Kelvin, could you help us understand, from your perspective, both as a medical professional as well as somebody who's a politician and therefore answerable to questions of governance, whether this emergency ordinance is really necessary, is needed as the government of the day claims?
I think the question we need to really ask with this emergency powers is what will be done differently to curb the spread. But instead, what we see the government implemented is basically MCO 2.0, which ironically is far less stricter compared to MCO 1.0. So there is a contradiction here. How would the government expect the same effectiveness per MCO 1.0 if many sectors were allowed to function when historically they have triggered massive clusters before? So what is the government actually trying to achieve with emergency powers when the current MCO is not even implemented to its fullest? Actually, fact of the matter is that many of the powers that was mentioned by the PM to curb the disease is already in the Prevention and Control of Infectious Disease Act, or commonly known as Act 342. So if they're not doing anything different with these emergency powers, why implement it in the first place?
Well, Kelvin, what the Defence Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob has said that they're going to do differently this time around under the emergency powers, under an emergency ordinance, is to allow the army to have the same powers as the police. They say that now the army can arrest undocumented workers. They can take direct action by arresting undocumented workers and putting them in a lockup. They say they can compel private hospitals to cooperate in the fight against COVID-19. If not, they can fine them. I think 5 million ringgit was the number bandied about. Hotels as well as quarantine centers can be compelled to do the same. That is what has been alluded to that they will do differently. Does that merit the call of state of an emergency?
All those actions actually can be done with even existing laws. I think the Immigration Act itself can give certain powers, as mentioned before, in terms of what we term as nationalizing of the private healthcare. That actually do not need to happen. You don't need to strong arm the private sector. Actually, the private sector has actually offered their help many times to be part of this whole society approach. So actually, what the government actually need to do is actually engage. You do not need to compel laws to force the private sector, even hotel sectors, to be part of your approach. They are actually willing to do so. All you need to come out with an agreement and understanding, and we can move forward from that without the need for an emergency, which has a cost to pay.
Kelvin, one of the things that, of course, is different about it is the fact that the emergency applies to the whole country, right? And I want to ask you specifically about Sarawak. Some people have argued that Sarawak has recorded less than 2,000 cases of the disease, and because there was a Pasai Siong cluster. But some of those say that this is no reason to impose emergency as a way of managing the COVID pandemic in the territory of Sarawak. what's your position on this? I mean, how complicated or beneficial is the emergency to the fight against COVID in Sarawak?
In my view, when it comes to a public health emergency, it should not just be purely a federal matter. Because actually, based on the federal constitution itself, public health is on the concurrent list, which means there is a shared responsibility between the state. And I believe this is very important because the state will know the local context of things. I myself am a proponent of certain form of decentralization when it comes to handling a public health emergency. So this concentration and centralization of power on the federal government can compromise such strategy. Of course, in the case of Sarawak, I think one of the biggest concern is the Sarawak state elections that is supposed to happen this year. It's supposed to dissolve latest by June, so the elections can be held in 2 months after that, it's August. So obviously, with this emergency proclamation, we are looking at an election after August, or if they are going to extend it, we are still kept in the dark on that matter. But in my view, the Election Commission actually can implement certain electoral reforms to make it a safer elections. And this includes something that I've been pushing for, which is postal votings for Sarawakians living outside of Sarawak. I'm talking about Sabah, West Malaysia, and also even extend it to high-risk population, even the elderly that are living in Sarawak. So there are many reforms that can be done without the need for such drastic action, such as an emergency.
Kelvin, it seems that the Chief Minister of the territory, Abang Jo, has come out to say that he's in support of the emergency. Does the emergency benefit any of the players, the political players, in the contest in the upcoming state elections?
I think it's difficult for me to say whether it is beneficial for them. However, I see again an usurping of powers from the federal government towards the state government, which is, in my view, unwarranted. Actually, during this period of time, what is really needed is scrutiny, is a counterbalance and counter-check by the opposition on the approach of the government. And as I mentioned, not just the federal government, but also the state government, because this is a public health matter, it is a concurrent list. So the fact of the matter that this emergency, this allows a state assembly for meetings. That itself is, for me, not beneficial. That is usurpation of powers, and that, again, may compromise the whole strategy or the approach against COVID in the state of Sarawak itself.
Well, not just focusing on the territory of Sarawak, but Kelvin, you are chairperson of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, Science and Innovation. What are your concerns now that there's been Parliament has been suspended of the ability for this PSC to provide some oversight on the governance and the management of this pandemic?
Of course, in my view, this PAC actually plays a very pivotal role, especially in the midst of a pandemic. It's very important to keep the government in check. It's very important to scrutinize the approach that they have. Two main approaches. One is the approach towards COVID itself, and number two is the whole national vaccination strategy. The issue that we have now is that because of emergency and Parliament is unable to sit, so we are heavily handicapped. We are limited in the things that we can do. For example, during this MCO period, to have a proceeding based on the standing orders, we need to do the proceedings within the premises of the Parliament. There's exact words in the standing order. So that means that we need to do physical meetings. I am in Sarawak, I'm in Kuttan right now, so a lot of things are limited. It's very difficult for me to fly over. There's so much quarantine orders when I fly back to Sarawak. So that itself actually hinders and handicaps us from doing what is necessary to make sure the whole process is sound, the whole process is polished. We get even the private sector healthcare coalitions involved, so it's a whole society approach. But then, due to this emergency, again, too much power on the executive, little transparency and little platform for us to scrutinize and also give confidence in the public. Because with better scrutiny, there is more confidence, there is more acceptance by the public, then we can really achieve what we want, especially handling a public health emergency.
Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight, Dr. Kelvin. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but we will be back with more, so stay tuned.
Is still on. It is our responsibility to adhere to all the regulations set by our Ministry of Health. We are in the era of a new norm. Face masks, social distancing, and also hand hygiene are just basics. We can do this together, and let's not take it easy.
COVID-19 is still out there. Let's do our part in following the SOPs in place so that we can break the transmission. Follow the 3 C's. Avoid closed conversations, avoid crowded spaces, and avoid confined spaces. We can beat this together.
The war on COVID-19 is not over. We should not take this lightly. Let us ensure all steps are taken to avoid the spread of the virus, be it social distancing, hand hygiene, and wearing of the face mask. It's a new norm. Let's not slack. We can do this.
We've done great so far, but the fight is far from over. We need to be vigilant to keep ourselves and others safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, and when you're out, keep a safe distance. In fighting this virus, we can't relax, so don't be lax.
We all know the war against COVID-19 is still on. It is our responsibility to adhere to all the regulations set by our Ministry of Health. We are in the era of a new norm. Face masks, social distancing, and also hand hygiene are just basics. We can do this together, and let's not take it easy.
COVID-19 is still out there. Let's do our part in following the SOPs in place so that we can break the transmission. Follow the 3 C's. Avoid closed conversations, avoid crowded spaces, and avoid confined spaces. We can beat this together.
The war on COVID-19.
Hi, you're watching Consider This with me, Melisa, Idris and Sharaad Kuttan. We're continuing our look at the consequences of the emergency proclamation, which suspends and silences the legislative branch of government at both federal and state levels. What consequences will this have on governance in general and in the fight against COVID-19 in particular? Joining the conversation now, we have Elizabeth Wong. She's the State Assembly Person for Bukit Lanjan and Chairperson of the Selangor Backbenchers Club. Good evening, Elizabeth. You've urged the Prime Minister to rescind emergency rule and allow for the legislative branch to function as a check and balance. Can you explain to us why this is? You think this is necessary?
Hi, Melissa. Good evening, everyone. Well, principally, it is because there's no good reason to suspend not only the parliament, but especially the state assemblies that we have in Malaysia. So even though there is a proclamation of emergency, it does not automatically suggest or means that state assemblies will be suspended. We have our rights, we have our duties that we have to perform in order to protect the people's rights, especially in this kind of situation, in this kind of environment where there is a pandemic, there is a health crisis going on. So to put us outside and not let us meet, and also to not allow us to question our state government, I think that is really not right.
Elizabeth, there seems to be, a war of persuasion going on. Those who defend the emergency proclamation, who talk up the COVID pandemic as a basis for this particular act, and those who for all kinds of other reasons say that in fact the pandemic can be managed quite well without it, and say that this move is purely political. You are a state assembly person. How do your constituents think about it? Are they persuaded by those who defend the emergency? Are they so terrified and fearful of the pandemic that they would like to see government have as much power as they can?
Well, I think my constituents in Bukit Lanjan, they are against the emergency. What they want to see is the government working together, first of all, with the state government, working together with state assemblymen and women so that we can address this issue together. I give you this situation. In Selangor, we have, I would say, we are the #1 state where there are so many COVID infections. But yet, the federal government does not share information does not share data with us, does not allow us to analyze the data. I think that in itself says a lot. The second thing is that if you look around, if you go around Klang Valley especially, people are so tired. People are tired of being scared. People are tired of being locked up. You know, their livelihoods, they are not are at risk. They are not able to go to work. You know, their shops are not making money. They're all closing down. Everyone is really tired to the point that I think whether there's an emergency or MCO 2.0, they stop caring because they just want to get on with their lives. So this is where I think we have an important role to play as legislators in Selangor.
Well,
we are in there.
Elizabeth, the
Yes.
Prime Minister has warned of firm action against anyone attempting to impede government efforts to address COVID-19 or manage the economy or even speak out against it. How are you reading this warning? How will that impact your work as a State Assembly person?
It is absolutely unnecessary. I mean, today I read some news article about them mobilizing the army, forcing hotels and private hospitals, warning them. I think it is absolutely, unthinkable. These are people or sectors who are more than willing to assist. The private hospitals, the doctors, the hotels, everyone wants to help the government. And the government should not be pushing us aside. And it's the same in Selangor. We want to help the state government. We are in the State Assembly to make sure that our state governments, which, by the way, I'm a government person, meaning I'm a government state assemblyman. I'm not the opposition, but I'm also in the State Assembly to make sure that my government is spending enough money to do the right thing. And I think that is what everyone should be looking at.
Elizabeth, what do you understand in terms of extent of the powers invested now in the federal government? What can they do to the state of Selangor? What kinds of matters can they push through that they might not have been able to do before this particular proclamation of emergency?
Okay, I think there's a wrong impression given, or people have this wrong impression. When there's a proclamation of emergency, it does not mean that, for example, the constitution is suspended. It does not automatically mean that the parliament or the state assemblies are also put aside or suspended. It doesn't mean that the laws do not exist in the country anymore. What it means is that the government, i.e. the Prime Minister, would have to put out special laws, ordinances, or special emergency laws where they have to tell expressly what are the areas they are going to take over. So, for example, I'm arguing the point that even though the Prime Minister has said that, state assemblies will be suspended, he must actually have a law to do that. He cannot do it verbally. And he must give good, proper reasons why this is a necessary thing to do in our battle against COVID-19. So they can do a lot, but they have to do it within the legal confines as well.
Okay. Well, you've raised concerns. Have any of the other State Assembly persons in Selangor raised these concerns to the Prime Minister? Do you know if any other states, particularly states that are not under Perikatan Nasional, raised these concerns as well?
My colleagues from Melaka, from Parti Keadilan Rakyat, they have also said the same thing, and I believe this is being discussed by many state assemblymen and especially members of parliament. So I think we have a critical role to play. No unaccountable government can do any effective work when it comes to trying to combat a health crisis or a pandemic. I mean, we have to keep our governments accountable, whether it's opposition or ruling party, MPs or state assemblymen, state assemblywomen. We have our role to play. And the Prime Minister cannot simply just take away our responsibility.
Elizabeth, thank you for your time. We appreciate your insights tonight. We'll be right back with more on Consider This. Don't go anywhere.
is still on. It is our responsibility to adhere to all the regulations set by our Ministry of Health. We are in the era of a new norm. Face masks, social distancing, and also hand hygiene are just basics. We can do this together, and let's not take it easy.
19 is still out there. Let's do our part in following the SOPs in place so that we can break the transmission. Follow the 3 C's. Avoid closed conversations, avoid crowded spaces, and avoid confined spaces. We can beat this together.
The war on COVID-19 is not over. We should not take this lightly. Let us ensure all steps are taken to avoid the spread of the virus, be it social distancing, hand hygiene, and wearing of the face mask. It's a new norm. Let's not slack. We can do this.
We've done great so far, but the fight is far from over. We need to be vigilant to keep ourselves and others safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, and when you're out, keep a safe distance. In fighting this virus, we can't relax, so don't be lax.
No, the war against COVID-19 is still on. It is our responsibility to adhere to all the regulations set by our Ministry of Health. We are in the era of a new norm. Face masks, social distancing, and also hand hygiene are just basics. We can do this together, and let's not take it easy.
19 is still out there. Let's do our part in following the SOPs in place so that we can break the transmission. Follow the 3 C's. Avoid closed conversations, avoid crowded spaces, and avoid confined spaces. We can beat this together.
The war on COVID.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with Consider This. I'm Melisa, Idris, with me Sharaad, Kuttan. Let's continue our conversation about the consequences of suspending Parliament and other state legislatures under the state of emergency. Joining us now, we have Noorazli Said. He is the Sepang Division Chief of UMNO. Good evening, Azli. Now, what would you say has been the sentiment among grassroots UMNO members about this sudden declaration of a state of emergency? What are the conversations that are being had about the need for an emergency?
Okay, hi Melisa. The grassroots already spoken. Slightly, the emergency declaration is not such needed. They mentioned the strict MCO will be just fine because we did it before, and we have done very good on the first MCO, and I think the MCO is just enough. Then we don't need any state emergency.
So what do you think UMNO members believe the reasons to be for the declaration of emergency? Are they seeing it as a political move because the Perikatan Nasional lost its majority in Parliament? There were threats from your party to withdraw support. Is that the reason they believe is behind this move?
Whether or not it's related to any political parties, it is considered irrelevant to our situation, as our Highness Agong already approved our country to be in emergency state. So as good Malaysian, we must all push aside our political differences and abide by the rules of the country no matter what happens.
Well, opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim had made an appeal to all MPs across the political divide to appeal to the Agong to rescind the proclamation of an emergency. What have you heard about that? Have you heard that that might get support from UMNO MPs?
Okay, I might say Anwar Ibrahim might got a point. As the media has portrayed, the proclamation has been approved by the Highness Agong according to the Federal Constitution advised by our PM. We understand and support the proclamation for the sake of the people due to the pandemic. However, the proclamation is not suitable during the current economic recession. This is not because of the COVID virus itself, but the losing faith from the investors against the political uncertainty of our nation at the moment. To me, when the declaration has been met and the parliament is hung, this means that automatically the constitution that is based on democracy has collapsed. The democratic cabinets can exist only and legally when the parliament are in sitting and operating, not hung by the proclamations.
Noorazli, do you believe that the government needs so much power and that it needs to insulate itself from, legislative accountability, whether at the federal level, the state level, in order to do a better job? Do you agree with this idea that actually the noise of politics is somehow disrupting the ability of the government to manage the pandemic better?
As I mentioned before, our country just needs a strict quarantine. Due to public knowledge, we all must know that our country will receive the vaccine somewhere in February. We strongly believe that all Malaysians will receive it. The antidote will be distributed equally among us. Then I don't see any reason why we should have any emergency declarations, and then we just make the democracy not being proper organized in this country. Then I hope that the federal government, when they have the emergency proclamations, that they will not stop the state and whatsoever, and do good for our nations, I believe.
If I may touch on the political dimension of the conversations that are being had about this, the necessity of the state of emergency, some analysts, some critics have pointed out that this is checkmate for UMNO, a strategic move on behalf of on the Prime Minister's side. Now, I'm wondering, has this stopped conversations in UMNO about the continued cooperation with Perikatan Nasional and specifically Bersatu?
For me, there is no such thing as a checkmate. Because if the governments today really care about the people and really care about the constitutions, then I believe the declaration cannot be seen as a move to checkmate UMNO. For us, UMNO is the organization that represent by the people, and then we have obligation to speak and tell and also do the checks and balance to the government. Even though we are part of the government, we have to do our job. We have to send the signals to the government and also make a what we call that, a checks and balance to the government. Then I believe I don't think so. The declarations, the proclamations has become the checkmate to UMNO. UMNO will not stand still. We have a few of planning and strategy. And what is important to us? We must stop this pandemic. We must make our economic growth, and we make this country great again. This is what we believe in UMNO.
Azli, thank you for joining us on the show and helping us understand the perspective of UMNO. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, Melisa.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching.